And welcome, one and all, wherever and whenever you may be. This is Universal Disclosure, meeting the moment. My name is Mike, an active UAP/UFO field investigator in Southern California, with my friend and co-host,
Reverend Stu in Melbourne, Australia.
Reverend Stu. This is our bonus episode, fireside chat/year in review. And I figure we just get right down into it without any introductions, just to see how that goes.
All right, well, there's quite a bit to review, so I'm definitely up for this.
Yeah, so we've come a long way in our first year, and I wanted to go over, the various people we talked to, and maybe our personal key takeaways from those conversations, and maybe even some other off the scenes kind of stuff that happened.
How many people have we interviewed in this season one?
So we've interviewed, I believe it was about 19 people. Some of those people were more than once. But we have 19 interviews aside from the episodes that we've done on our own, or the mini little episodes here and there, like the bonus things, as it were.
Okay, fantastic. I feel like we've been hard at work here uncovering disclosure information.
Certainly have. And it's been an interesting journey, because some of the people that we've talked to are kind of brand new or newer, I think, to talking about this topic publicly, and some of the people we talk to are not and have been talking about this topic publicly for decades. But even those folks, I feel like we've brought out some information that maybe they probably didn't ever say because they weren't asked the question.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. I'm always very interested by what emerges during an interview, just by the questions we ask, and just going with the flow of the conversation. Fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely honing in on an aspect of this that I don't know of any other podcast, quite frankly, that is. And there's definitely a connection between the esoteric elements and the physical elements of this topic. And I think that's potentially why there is so much slowness and or blowback in the propulsion of the larger conversation throughout the world, that some people might think that the U.S. government is driving that train, but I don't agree with that. I think it's not necessarily us specifically, right? But all the different podcasters out there who are driving that train.
Well, it's a very complex situation. And in a way, the ETs or entities are asking the military industrial complex to act as shamans, which is very strange. And by shaman, I mean someone who understands the situation, who can guide others on this path. I, I wouldn't like to be in their shoes, I don't think. I think this is very complex and difficult.
All right. Well, are you talking about you don't want to be in ET's shoes, or you don't want to be in the military shoes? And I'm not sure I agree with your comment there, but
Well, I I'd have difficulty with this disclosure. So I mentioned this during another podcast when I was saying, okay, Mike, it's our turn. We're in charge now of releasing disclosure. Now, when are we doing it? And I know we'd be enthusiastic and everything, but I mentioned in that same episode that I'm actually for a soft, slow, gentle, incremental disclosure because it's so mind blowing. Even the stuff that we've come to understand is mind blowing, let alone the whole story.
it certainly is. And I'm 50-50 on that. And I think originally I probably would have been 100% on board with you, but now I'm just like, you know what? We do need to get this out there. But with that said, it's not like in one day everyone's just going to be like, oh, here's all the information, because it's not possible to give all the information in a single day. That's why our conversations are so gosh darn long to begin with. I've heard from somebody that tunes in that they do like it, but the conversation is long. I was like, yeah, because this isn't something that you can just talk about in 15 or 20 minutes and be done with it.
No, well, we're asking everyone to go on a journey with us, and so are these ETs, of understanding our reality, understanding who we are. That's why I talked about this whole shaman aspect. And that's not a simple thing. That's not a simple thing for an individual. It's not a simple thing for a country, a nation, a collective. It's always a difficult thing. So we're actually the people that are advocating for disclosure. What they're advocating for is basically we want everyone to go on a spiritual shamanic journey and experience and wake up to who they really are. And that's what I mean. That's a very big task, a very big ask.
Okay, now I get it. Yeah. So on that regard, a lot of these folks who want the full disclosure right away, they've been following the topic for a very very long time, but I'm not convinced that the UFO world, as it were, truly understands what it is that we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's a topic that will lead to an exploration of self. So, by asking the questions, what is this phenomena? Who are these entities? The next question is, well, who are we in relation to them? And that'll get you on a whole roller coaster ride of revelation, which once that roller coaster starts, you can't get back off.
Exactly. So it's almost like a catch-22, but it's got to be done. It's being done. It's happening. It's slow, but that's how it is. And I've said it a bunch of times. There's like over 8 billion people in the world. How many of them are really tuning into this now? More and more every day. And we're seeing that right here on our own channel. Now, whether those people are new to the topic or not, I don't really know. I know some of them are, and I know some of them are not, and that's probably just it makes sense how it would be. But yeah, so like before we kind of go over like who we spoke with this past season and go into those conversations a little bit, I wanted to float an idea like I'm kind of for like where we're going to go next season, right? um, on one hand, I'm more than satisfied with all of the conversations that we've had, and I feel like we've presented a pretty compelling, case, as it were, for anyone who's new to the topic to, you know, open themselves up to it and embrace it, and also open to revisiting, any of the conversations or topics that we've discussed. But I also want to break some new ground here, perhaps, and venture out a little bit farther, because that is ultimately where we just sort of alluded to where this goes to. And what do I mean specifically by that is uh, talking potentially with some experiencers, but that's going to be tricky.
Oh, yeah, because pardon the pun here, but we're entering a grey area there. We're really going off into the weeds, that's for sure. And people's subconscious or unconscious is interpreting the situation through the filter of their belief system, their archetypes, their symbols. So that's why there will be some congruency where they're talking about the same thing, but then it'll shoot off into different directions. So it's a difficult thing to navigate, Mike. It's different to asking, okay, where was the craft scene? What did it do? I mean, I imagine even when you're asking those questions, people see different phenomena, or they different. They interpret the phenomena differently, do they?
They do. For the most part, people are in awe or inspired or amazed, but there are times when people are scared, and that tells me something too, because the number of folks I talk to who are scared are low, right? But on a statistical standpoint, let's say, I don't know, let's say maybe 10% of them or so were scared when they saw something. That tells me, generally speaking, there's a lot of people out there who might, I mean, the UFO world, frequently says like, oh, we can handle it. And I believe we can too, but there are people who can't, so that's kind of the thing where we want to somehow go out to those people and, get them ready or prepared. I don't know, open to the idea. I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does, because that kind of Jungian shadow work, facing the dark aspects of yourself, which might present as external aspects, that's part of shamanism. So when people encounter this phenomena, they can go into fear. And there's a Whitley quote, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it basically says that these entities reflect to your own state back to you, which I think is definitely the situation. And that's esotericism 101.
Yeah, so just to um, uh, kind of paraphrase that, I guess, right? What does that mean, right? Well, if you are a person who is like happy-go-lucky, well, then you're likely to have a happy to neutral experience if you're encountering one of these beings or creatures or entities, whatever you want to call them, right? But if you're someone who is, um, you know, angry or depressive or anxious or anything. Like it's sort of like they're a mirror, and it comes right back to you. So you're essentially feeling your own emotions, and it's postulated or stated that they themselves feel whatever you're feeling, like 10 times stronger, and then just deflecting it back at you. That I want to harp on that a little bit, because it's a really big deal. Like, anyone who's listening, take stock right now on yourself. What kind of person are you, and what would it be like for you to have the soul mirror reflected back, and how would you react to that?
Yes, so I don't want to go too far in this direction in this particular show, but this is all shamanism. It's all going down the path of facing yourself. And that's a very confronting thing, for me included. It's not always easy to see the good or bad things. And by good, I mean the aspects of what we truly are, who and what we truly are is very enormous, very big. And that's hard to deal with as well. Now, I've spoken to some experiences and I've read accounts. And sometimes some of the experiences can feel fear initially, and that can dissipate over time where they become more comfortable with these entities. And I guess, in a sense, more comfortable with themselves. That's what I meant about this being a complicated issue.
Yeah, so that's also why I wanted to potentially go down that road, and I'm going to call it Woo Avenue with love and respect. But an example of that is like, let's just take Fort, for example, in California. It's a military base where I know of a number of former military people who were there, and have later reported going right up through the ceiling, through the roof, into a craft of non-human origin. And for most people, when they hear that, oh, okay, it's very difficult to wrap your head around. So that's why, I mean, we've had a couple of people reach out to us in this first season who wanted to join the conversation, and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm open to it, but not yet, because what you're going to talk about is farther down the road than what we're currently talking about, and I didn't want to, go too far too quickly as a younger, humble, growing channel, right? But that's kind of where it goes, and that's why my hesitation was.
Okay, I understand that. It's going to be a situation where we're speaking to people and not necessarily affirming or agreeing with what they're saying, but just creating a space where they can discuss that with us. And some of my friends and even some of the comments I've noticed have been really applauding us for the way we allow the guests to speak. And I'm happy to do that with experiences. I want to create a non-judgmental environment where they can talk about their experiences. And, I'll be very curious about that. I'll probably bring in these sort of esoteric levels subtly, because that in itself is confronting. Like, if someone asked me, what's this whole ET experience, what's going on? And I said, well, it's actually a spiritual journey. It's facing yourself. They'll be like, I don't want that. That's not what I'm after. No, Stuart. I'm talking about ETs here, not spiritual journey or shamanic experience. At that point, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to leave you to that until you want to talk about that. And hopefully these people are open to talking about that side and aspect of this phenomenon.
Okay, yeah. So okay, let me put it to you this way. When we started doing this podcast, it was a big learning curve too, but I had a general idea of what we were talking about, right, where it was going to go. Never did I think, personally, never did I think that my quest for, let's say, I don't want to keep saying ET, right? Let's call it non-human intelligence. I want to, okay, so my personal quest for non-human intelligence and the transparency of that topic, I did not ever think would lead to us talking with Timothy Hogan in our final episode,
Yeah.
Grandmaster of the Knights Templar, and that is such a spiritual way, and it's kind of like, I joked around with one of my friends. I was like, I feel like a real life Robert Langdon. I wasn't expecting to be, effectively, in a way, talking about the Holy Grail itself while searching for ET. I mean, wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I think I mentioned in an earlier podcast that I was intuitively and instinctively following these two threads independently. So I was on my whole spiritual journey and deep dive into esotericism. I was meeting people, exchanging ideas, and I was also following this whole UFO, UAP experiencer topic through people like Whitley Strieber. And I had an amazing moment many years ago now where I realized this is the same track. It's the same thing. One informs the other. And it was shocking for me. So I've been through a bit of that journey too. Now, I'll mention this too. If you want to strip out the religious or spiritual aspect, there kind of is a way to do that because if you follow a more Buddhist path of releasing attachments, you can sort of navigate. I believe personally, this is my humble opinion, you can sort of navigate the topic there because no, that gets into deep stuff. So releasing attachments to what might happen to you, um, releasing attachments to your impression about yourself, whether that's positive or negative, just becoming zen and somehow reaching a neutral state. Now that's a tall ask, you know. I'm trying to separate it for the purpose of people who might instinctively reject any kind of religion or spirituality, which I respect. You know, I'm not against that perspective because I know some people have had bad experiences or they just don't believe what they're told. They're hearing different stories from different religions. I get it. You know, how does all this correlate? How does all this fit together? But this is the same sort of situation we're going to encounter when we speak to contactees, you know, experiences, because they're all seeing it through a different lens and they're all having a different experience. Now, I think it's quite likely and possible that some of these people in the past who have had these experiences and subsequently started, well, they didn't start religions, but religions that sprung off from their experiences, most probably had experiences with interdimensional beings. Now, you can say angels, see, that's an interdimensional being, or you know, Satan, if you want to go down that path in the Bible. I think they've had an experience, they've tried to express that experience and explain it like an experiencer. And then subsequently, people have gone off and formed a religion around that because they've tried to solidify it in time, make it a fixed template that others can follow. So I'm kind of used to that level of exploration too, comparative religions. So I can see the threads or motifs that also emerge with experiences. Now, Dr. Diana Walsh Pasulka was talking in one of her books about she's getting to witness the emergence of a brand new spirituality or religion as it's occurring. And she's talking about this whole ET disclosure. So she's aware of that level too. And that's why I'm absolutely fascinated to have her on the show at some point if we can manage that.
Yeah, that would be great. I'll look into see if we can make that happen. No promises or guarantees, right? But I would welcome that as well. And yeah, the funny thing is, ever since the beginning of time, there has been a separation between church and state. Church is spiritual, state is military. That's what it is. And there's this weird, I don't know, dichotomy of sorts where they both do their own thing, but now it's starting to intermingle. And it should, and it should have happened a long, long time ago, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. And that's what I was saying earlier. So the military industrial complex, aerospace, big tech, government being asked to be shamans. Hey, can you please tell us what's going on here? Who are we? What are we? Who are these ETs? They're thinking, oh my goodness, we're not set up for this role. We're trying to understand this too. So I kind of empathize with their situation. They're probably frightened as well, you know, trying to understand what's happening. I suspect strongly that they understand and know more than they're revealing. It was great to talk to Timothy Hogan about how he's been approached. I knew that sort of thing had been happening in these circles where aerospace, government, um, you know, intelligence services had been speaking to people in the esoteric community. I kept seeing that pop up, and I was like, okay, they are not sure about what's happening either if they're coming to people like us. So there's this weird overlap. But what you're saying is true, Mike, and everything's becoming the same thing. Now, in the Timothy Hogan episode, we discussed about how the way the pharaohs were also a priesthood. So at that time, it was the same thing. The leader, the monarch, the pharaoh, was also the spiritual leader. And I don't know how I feel about that. I think there's wisdom in separating church and state. Um, things can get, there can be conflict of interest, of course. And I guess that's a little bit of what we're seeing now, because if we're asking these bodies to reveal truths to us and disclosure, well, there can be a conflict there too, because there might be reasons why they don't want to reveal that information for national security or whatever you want to call it, the stability of our society. So that probably weighs heavily on their consciousness too about how to make the right decision and how to do the right thing by us.
Yeah, yeah, but also at this point in time, there's more people alive today that are open to and accepting this than there ever were before, and it's I believe it's effectively reached critical mass in terms of the number of people who are open to the possibility that the ETs exist, and then it's sort of like a funnel where the people who think that they're here or whatnot, it sort of trickles down just like anything would. But I'm not sure what point I'm trying to make there, but
No, I
it's
get it.
it's
It's
understandable.
well, it's time. So
Yeah.
I don't want you or the audience to feel like I'm resistant to this. I'm not saying that.
Well, you better not be, man, because you're on freaking the Universal Disclosure podcast, right? We're helping to push forward in any way that we can, and we're impacting people directly. And I know some of the people that we're impacting have very interesting positions in this world or this life, and they can do wonderful, wonderful things. And I've heard privately that they are, you know, have a whole new, I don't want to say level of respect, right? But a whole new maybe acceptance of what we're talking about.
That's an honor to hear that people are watching the show and coming up with new ideas because of what we're exposing them to. And I certainly am. I've mentioned before, I'm learning from the guests that we're speaking to. It's been absolutely enriching for me, and I'm very grateful for it.
It certainly has. So just to kind of like, I mean, on one hand, it'd be kind of cool, right, to talk with experiencers. On the other hand, I know as a fact that most of them are not going to want to speak because of what we talked about earlier. When if someone's talking about being pulled through a wall or a ceiling or something to that effect, I mean, it's one thing if someone says, "Oh, I saw a craft. It landed on the ground. I went up to it." I touched it, whatever. There's a certain believability aspect that people can wrap their brains around with that. But it's a
Mm.
different thing altogether when they didn't see the craft. It was above their structure that they were in, and they are pulled right up through it. That's a whole different level of, what do you do with this information? So, and more often than not, the stories are like the going through the wall story, right? Than they are just approaching the physical craft. So what I'm thinking is if we can set this up in a number of different ways. Basically, it's kind of like taking an idea from a little bit ago and tweaking it a little bit. Instead of having people like call in or whatever and talk about their sighting, maybe they call in and talk about their experience there. We don't see who they are. Okay. We
Yep.
only know their first name and their city. They're audio only. We can do either a pre-recorded thing. They could schedule a time when we can do it through Zoom. They can call and they can just talk if they want to, or we could do a time when we're on and we're only hearing their voice. And if they want, we can potentially ask them some questions or interject into it or something to that effect. But it would be a way that you could tell your experience or story, as it were, and sort of get it off your chest in a way that you're still anonymous.
I like that idea, especially if it's going to facilitate more people coming forward. Because you can hear in their voice the sincerity when they're speaking. So I really like that layer beyond just reading an account. Definitely interested in that, Mike. That's a great idea.
Yeah, kind of like giving a little bit of life to the accounts, and it's very it's a cathartic thing for people to speak it out. But again, just even like what we talked about with my sighting investigations, they typically start out with, "I've never told anybody this," and in some cases, once they start talking, oh, it just like blah, 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 and it's because they've held it inside for so gosh darn long. So, in a way, maybe it's like an outlet, right? So that's the idea. Anyway, I don't know if people are going to be receptive to it, but we're putting it out there right here, right now, folks. What do you think? If that's something that you find interesting, if you want to participate, reach out to us. It's pretty easy to find our contact information, and other people have reached out to us, like we've sort of talked about earlier too, and perhaps we'll bring some of those people in as well.
Sounds fantastic. If we could maybe put some links at the bottom of this video, I think that would help. Now, Mike, I wanted to address this passing through walls briefly. So I know that's possible from personal experience in the astral realm, right? So I haven't gotten into too much discussion about my experiences, but I'll touch upon this briefly. So many people have done astral projection. Once you leave your body, you can actually pass through walls, up through the ceiling if you want to. But my question, the thing I can't figure out is with these abduction accounts, their body seems to be gone as well. So in the case of an astral projection, your body's still laying in the bed or on the sofa or wherever it is. But that's the part I can't quite wrap my head around. And I'm interested to talk about them about, I see, so I'm not skeptical is what I'm meaning. So I know that's possible in a certain form, in a certain way, because I've done it myself. I've spoken to many other people who have. But actually displacing and taking your body with you, I can't understand that. But that might be viewed as an ET technology. I say that in quotation marks, or an understanding of the related principle of astral projection into the physical, an extension of that, which is very interesting because then you're bordering into stargates, which Timothy Hogan talked to us about, where it's not, I don't, by the sounds of it, it's not your astral body that goes through the stargate. It seems to be your entire body. So I'm figuring there's some connection with that technology too. So what I'm saying here is I'm open to these discussions, especially coming from an esoteric lens, and I'm happy to facilitate that for people in the show.
Awesome. And yeah, I don't have the answers. Absolutely not, right? And that's kind of why I want to explore it a little more as well. But I mean, part of me wonders. I mean, I know that there are for sure sometimes physical, like the person's physical body is gone because people have observed them not in the room, right? And then
Mm.
suddenly they're there or whatever. But I also wondered, and I've asked a couple of people this, and they've always said like, "Oh, wow, what a great question," but nobody's been able to answer it. What if what if the astral body were to be taken out of the physical body, and then things performed upon the astral body that imprints the physical body? Is that possible? That opens up a whole new can of worms, effectively, probably. But who knows?
Oh, wow. I got a lot to say on that. We might have to do a particular show. But I will say this. The first time I successfully astral projected, and I did it on purpose, I read how to do it because a number of people had told me it was real and I wanted to find out for myself. I came back thinking, which one is the template, the astral realm or the physical realm? Which one is reflecting the other one? And I went a bit deeper into that path. Um, I don't want to get into the details of it right here, Mike, but I might in the future. But that's a smart question. And someone in esotericism would definitely be able to give you an answer on that because there's talk of people, magi, magicians, whatever you want to call them, entering the astral realm, making changes, which then reflect and manifest in this reality. So that question is definitely on point.
Okay, so now you got me curious. I'm I wasn't expecting to do this, Stuart, but I'll just say it too. I have left my body as well a number of times, sometimes spontaneously, sometimes at will, and I know that it's that's a fact. So if anyone doesn't believe that, I don't give a damn because it happened.
Mm.
Um, so I'm right there with you, and that's as far as I'm going to go with it. But um, you know, not much fear here. Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, I'll get into this now. There's so many topics here, Mike. The initiatory rites of the mystery school involved sensory deprivation and creating a situation where your astral body would leave your body so that you could see for yourself. It's somewhat depicted in the movie Doctor Strange. I don't know if you've seen that, but Doctor Strange
No.
goes to the Ancient One who creates a situation where Doctor Strange leaves his body. And that's the point. He comes back to his body and says, "Teach me." And that's the point. You're supposed to see for yourself. So that's why on my journey, I heard from so many people that it was real and they were so sincere. Just like with this experiencer thing we're going to encounter, we're in season 2. I heard from so many people that I sought the experience. I bought every book I could find on astral projection. I learnt the techniques and I was able to do it. And I was sort of, I guess, a bit scientific in my approach. Once I got out, I tried some different things, like we're talking about, passing through walls. I know this sounds insane, but I've experienced it firsthand, and it's going to help and guide and inform me when we're talking to experiences.
I think that's very, very true. Just to put it out there, though, if anyone is interested in this type of astral projection, as it were, um, I'd be cautious to, I mean, there's videos on YouTube that allegedly tell you how to do it or whatever, and there's a little bit of truth to what they're saying. But before you attempt to do it, you really need to understand what you're getting yourself into. So it's not something I recommend anyone just like try willy nilly. And yeah, just beware of what you ask for, right?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree and endorse that statement. Now, that whole journey, there's a parallel with that in this ET contact because in that astral realm, you manifest your reality quite quickly. So that's why the spiritual teachers from the past were getting us to center our minds, become stable, and release attachment so we could enter the afterlife or the astral realm or an ET contact with a calm, still mind so that we're not having everything reflected back to us of a negative nature. So that's why the parallel here with shamanism.
It just dawned on me, Stuart, how freaking significant this very specific conversation we have been having really is on this channel. And it just dawned on me that nobody else is yet having this specific conversation of merging this all together.
Wow, I guess you're right. Um,
I don't
Everything's
know. That
coming
sounds. I mean,
together.
I should probably take that part out. It sounds so pompous, but that's what I'm thinking right now.
No, no, it's fair enough, because I told you I've been following these two threads for years, and I haven't really seen them put together. There's one other show my friend Miguel Connor runs called Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio. So I kind of spoke to him about my journey and said, "Look, there seem to be related these two issues." And about the same time, he seemed to realize the same thing, and I could see on his show he was having more ET UFO contact type interviews. So there are people that are aware of this. The esoteric people certainly are, because as Dr. Jacques Vallée found, these occurrences and motifs have been occurring through history. So in Passport to Magonia, Dr. Jacques Vallée talks about the similarity between fairy encounters, demonic entities, um, a kind of whole plethora of entities and experiences, which all seem to be related to the same thing here.
Um, all right. So why don't we? I mean, I think we should probably do a little bit of a recap of how did we even get to the point where we're talking about these wild things, right? And so we started off with our first episode, just two of us explaining who we are, why we're here, what we're doing, and then the second one I interviewed you, and you were talking about how people in your congregation, sort of reach out and talk about these things because they don't know sort of where else to go or who else to turn to. They're trying to make sense of them, and then we brought in our first guest, which was Kevin Day. U.S. Navy retired, and he spent a lifetime on many U.S. vessels, and he was the guy, or he and his team. And in fact, that's why I wanted him to be our very first guest, quite frankly, is because, in my opinion, it is him specifically that has a lot to do with the fact that everyone all over the damn world is talking about this right now.
Yeah, that was a smart move, Mike. It kept us grounded in, you know, things that data points that could be actually that were recorded, and the Pentagon subsequently released the video from that incident. So that was a very smart place to start. And you'll notice that even Kevin went into some somewhat esoteric discussion,
Hmm.
and had some kind of encounter with a couple of people. I don't know who or what they were, but even if they weren't interdimensional beings, they certainly were talking about those kind of that kind of information to him.
Yeah, I remember their names specific. Forrest and Shakate. Those are very specific names. I don't think I'll ever forget. But they were very human. But yeah, they sort of appeared. No, they didn't appear, right? But they went to visit him, and he quickly realized that there was more to them than what they said there was. And yeah, there was. I feel like we should maybe talk to him again at some point soon too, because one of the things that they mentioned to him is that I'm paraphrasing here, but try to get it exactly like they didn't want to see him make a continental plate shift into the ocean, and that there's a couple things I want to ask about that in more detail because I think there's multiple meanings to that statement that they kind of tossed out to him.
Yeah, they might have meant him in particular, or all of us together collectively manifesting that outcome. So I don't know. That would be worth clearing up with him. And maybe he doesn't know, but I'd certainly like to ask him the question.
Yeah, and there was even a whole another take on that I was wondering about because he was talking about the land that is underneath him and what's under there and um, it made me wonder in a more physical sense and geological sense if that has something to do with that statement. But um, yeah, maybe we should see if we can have another conversation with him at some point soon if he's open to it and spend a little bit more time on the esoteric side.
That's a great idea, Mike.
Again, no promises or guarantees, but we can potentially ask and see. So then, and then after that, we had Robert Salas, who is another person who's very sort of instrumental also in why we're having this discussion around the world. When the UFOs turned off the nukes in the 60s in the Air Force Base that he was a captain of. I'm sorry, the missile silos, but he was captain of. And it was in part his efforts that sort of cracked open the case, as it were, many decades ago, and he's been putting it out there for a very long time.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It was an absolute honor to have that gentleman on the show. I noticed quite recently, I saw an article that mentioned him in the regular news and the mainstream news because I'm seeing this. I know I've got a radar for it, but I'm seeing this whole UAP UFO topic coming up recurrently through the news. It's always on my feed.
Yeah, I mean there was definitely there. I mean there was a couple of hearings this year. Well, both of them were in November actually. One of them I think made a much bigger splash than the other, and everybody who's sort of following this on a regular, no surprises there. But with that said, even the one that I'm saying made a bigger splash, the larger UFO community maybe doesn't agree with that. But again, it's the in a way, it's like the symbology behind it is maybe more powerful than the actual things that happened. Um, but my opinion.
Okay, I think Captain Robert Sala was at some of these recent hearings. Even am I correct in that?
Yeah, he was. So he was at the most recent one in November as audience participation, as it were. But he's been hopefully getting close to being able to testify, about his story officially to Congress. I know that he spoke with Arrow, and I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't, but I mean, if he chose to, he could maybe rock that boat a little bit if he really wanted to.
Wow, what a brilliant man that he's still working on this for us, for our collective.
Yeah, basically for his lifetime, and much like Kevin Day as well, sort of went down that road. And these are both trailblazers who have faced all kinds of silly things, and yet they keep going. God bless them. Um, and it sort of paves the way for others to come forward.
I really honor and respect both of those gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise for me as well. And then what? And then after that, we were established like the physical nature of it. Right, these things were tracked on. Tic were tracked on radar multiple days, and Commander Fravor goes up with his crew and has visual contact with the darn things. Robert Salas confirms and tells us that these, although the objects that turned off the nukes, I don't know if they necessarily saw the object, but they saw the light of the object and the red orange orbs. I don't like to use the word orbs, but spheres, as it were, right? That disabled the physical nuclear missiles. So there's the physical aspect. And then after that, you brought in your friend Reverend David William Perry, and we jumped right into the esoteric aspect.
I love that. Love that man. Yeah, he's a little bit of a mentor to me. So I knew he'd have some interesting things to talk about, and he sure did. And I love the energy he brings when he's on the show.
Yeah, I did too, especially because I mean this is a very very serious topic, right? And our first two guests, we saw that in the way that they were talking and the things they were saying. Now, Reverend David Perry had a really nice levity to him, and he wasn't poking fun at anything, but he was having fun with the topic, which I think is an important thing to do as well, because this is, you know, in a way, it doesn't get more serious than this.
Well, that's what I was talking about earlier, to try and bring a level state, a humble state, a balanced state, and laughter is a powerful thing. It can change our whole perspective. So I really respect and appreciate his whole approach.
Yeah, indeed. And he actually, as we learned, he became a sort of frequent contributor here, and he'll be back again too because we love him so much, and he has so much to talk about, quite frankly. Um, After that, we spoke with another one of your friends, Andrew Razowitz, who is a former U.S. Coast Guard and former fire department, New York City firefighter, as it were.
Yeah, he's a very interesting one because of he's quite credentialed and he's done a lot of interesting things. Very open-hearted person. I met him at a Skywatch, a C5 here, going back a number of years now, and we just absolutely hit it off. We just talked non-stop. Um, it was fantastic. We've had a great friendship since then, so I was very grateful for his appearance on our show.
Yeah, as was I. And I mean, he talked about a sighting that he had while in the Coast Guard. He talked about the Coast Guard effectively telling him that, yeah, you're going to see these things. Keep it to yourself, kind of thing. Is basically how that all went. And then he talked about the CE5 as well, to which I immediately presented my um, hesitations or unsurety. Like I'm open to the idea, right? But I kind of it was that, and there was another topic that I completely shut down, which was the military abductions. And then we had. I even I have trouble talking about it right now because of the idea behind it, right? Like humans, taking other humans to extrapolate or extract information, like what happened, what did they do to you when you're on the ship. Like I still don't know what I feel about that, but I can understand or see that there's probably people in the world who actually would do that. So like, I don't know.
That's a real tricky one, Mike, because as you know, with the Men in Black, we're not certain if they're actual military people or entities posing as military people. So it's a little bit of a, excuse me using the expression again, a bit of a grey area there.
Yeah, indeed. And it's a lack of transparency that has us all, wondering and postulating. But at this point, like in a way, who cares, right? That what really matters is that we're coming together as people and we're having these conversations and we're working it out. And we're coming to our own conclusions of whatever we think that it might be, because that's what we do, right? Um,
Yeah, I like that. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to find the answer with all this questioning too, but I am learning. I'm learning about myself too on this journey. So This is a journey I was already on, and it's a privilege to be on it with other people now because I feel, in a way, supported, and I hope we're supporting them.
Yeah, ditto and likewise for me on that. Um, so so then we went into the more academic side with Dr. Joanna Kiowa, another one of your friends there, and we had some amazing conversations with her.
Yeah, she's just fantastic. So much information, and she's really coming to the fore now with this kind of whole connection between UAPs and esotericism. And she's a fan of Dr. Diana Walsh Basulka, as I am. And I kind of see Dr. Joanna Kiyawa as our equivalent of Dr. Basulka here in Australia.
Yeah, I can definitely see that as well. Because Dr. Joanna studied at the Pontifical Institute, I believe it was called, which is a wing of the Vatican, essentially specializing in medieval studies. And it was really interesting conversations to have with her about the very nature of reality in our universe and how the universe sort of flows out like a fountain, and consciousness effectively is I've definitely heard that a lot too over the past couple of years, where anyone who's started talking about this is starting to use consciousness. And at one point I thought it was kind of like a buzzword, and in some regards I think it still might be, because a lot of times I think when people just throw out the word consciousness, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. But you know that's my personal opinion. But there are people who do know what the hell they're talking about, such as Dr. Kiyawa. And for her to say that, it helped me sort of put some things into perspective.
Yeah, she's great at doing that because she's a lecturer at university, or she certainly has been in the past, and she's an author writing on these topics and really breaking new ground here with this topic.
Absolutely. Next up, we went really, really far into the weeds, but I'm glad we did it. We spoke with Mary Rodwell, who is why don't you remind everybody who she is?
Yeah, she's a clinical therapist who these days specializes in assisting people who have had abduction experiences or encounters. So she kind of felt herself organically and naturally drawn into assisting those people. And I really honor and respect her too. So I met her at a conference here in Melbourne because she lives in Australia. And it was fascinating. She did a workshop. She's talking about some of the, she didn't give any names, of course, due to privacy, but she spoke about some of the issues that experiences deal with and encounters. And I got to have a bit of a talk with her afterwards. She told me something I'll never forget. I mentioned it to her. She said, Stuart, you need to ask yourself why you're so interested in this topic. And that has stuck with me. I do ask myself that.
I do remember her saying something to that effect in the public conversation as well, and she said basically, like, if you are really into this topic, there's a reason. So uh, it's perhaps a very telling thing to come from someone who is working specifically and directly with experiencer folks. And one of the my I mean, I like the whole conversation. I like all of our conversations, but my favorite part of that one potentially was the when she talked about the alien language, as it were. And then I asked her if she could send us some photos, and she did, and we posted those in the video itself, and also on our website if you want to look at the stills of multiple different people who are showing what appears to be a language of sorts. And it doesn't look anything like anything I've ever seen. I thought that was pretty wild.
Yeah, well, there's some interesting things that happen behind the scenes. I'm not going to go into detail for privacy, but another guest reached out when they saw that and said, that's similar to what I've seen.
Yeah, um, I found that pretty interesting as well. And then after that, we brought in my friend and mentor and UFO boss Earl Grey Anderson, and he talked about the ontological shock factor that happens. He talked a little bit about his own personal experience, but primarily we were talking about the ontological shock, and then also the revelations that his own mother, who worked for Howard Hughes, told him when he was a little child, and he remembered. And about a city under the desert where people were working on all kinds of stuff in Howard Hughes's company.
That one was fantastic because that was all new to me. So when I bring a guest I'm familiar with, it's great when you lead the questions because you're kind of discovering about the guest. And in that case, I was learning about Earl Grey, and I could see what you meant about him being a welcoming, charming individual. And I love the energy he brought to the show.
Yeah, it was another fun conversation, and it was very. I even learned some things about him that I didn't even know. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, that's happened to me with some of the guests I know. And that's what we talked about earlier. You ask a certain question, or you ask a question, I hear something from my friend that I've never heard before.
Yeah, it seems to be primary, not necessarily always right, but primarily the spiritual sided questions, and that's something I want to toss out there too, because especially in our earlier days when we weren't even public yet, and we were just trying to get people to talk with us. All of them said, "Well, just so you know, I'm not religious." I was like, "You don't have to be. This isn't about religion." And then when we asked them spiritual questions, oh my God, that there goes the conversation, and we open it up into things that we never thought we're going to be talking about, because religion and spirituality are two different things. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, just to
Um,
recap on that, and this is my personal opinion again, religion is someone else's path that you're trying to emulate, which isn't necessarily a negative thing. And I see spirituality as your own individual path and journey.
yeah, that's a great way to put it. And then from there, we did a little experiment, and we got a response from Pastor Christopher, who sent in just a brief audio talking about his sighting and uh, potential experience, but mostly just sighting, I think, and how it affected his faith or beliefs and what his concerns were. And then that's when I also realized that idea, although great, right? Not everybody's set up to make a recording and send it in, which is why I wanted to make it easy for people to reach out to us and talk to us without showing their image, as it were.
Yeah, I'm keen to have more of that. And that's particularly a useful way to go for experiences if they don't want to show their face or if they want to remain anonymous at this point.
Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. Then we went down the road of back, weaving the conversation. Right, we're back into the physical material. We spoke with Ryan Wood, who is one of the leading experts on the Majestic 12 program, and also UFO crash retrievals.
Now, that was another really good conversation, and that's been coming up in these hearings. So I've
Mm-hmm.
noticed during the hearings, the senators will ask, or whoever's involved in the questioning will ask, do we have any actual physical material here? And I get that line of questioning. They're trying to ground it back in this reality. So I really appreciate that man's work.
Yeah, and now I'm just sort of for the first time understanding why it's so complicated for what's going on in Washington right now, because they're they're trying to ground this thing in physical that isn't 100% physical. How do you do that?
Yeah, well, see, we followed that template with the show, as you just said. We had some people who could talk about actual times, locations, dates, uh, radar picking up these phenomenon, keeping it grounded in this reality. Okay, what missiles were switched off, that's a great place to start. We've started there, and I think these disclosure projects or hearings are wise to start in that point too.
Well, yeah, just to put it out there, I do know that there was attempts or almost some maybe near misses, right, where these conversations were going to take place, but for whatever reason they never came to fruition, and that was potential frustrating aspect for those folks involved. And then to further mesh it in, because when we had talked to Kevin Day originally, as our first guest, and he kind of floated the idea that the machines themselves were alive. And the most recent hearing, the second to most recent one, like the one that made like the bigger splash, I guess to say, right? It was November 11th. Was it November 11th or 13th or
Yeah, I think it was the 11th from memory.
yeah, something. Sorry, folks. I don't claim to be a historian, right? I just too much information to know off the top of your head, right? But I think everyone knows what we're talking about there. One of the questions was asked to Lou Elizondo about the possibility of the machines being alive, as it were. So that we started touching upon that a little bit with Dr. Joanna Kiyawa again when we talked about AI, and we titled that one "Homo Roboticus," which I think is a great title, a great name.
I like that too. That's interesting that that was being asked at the hearing about are these machines alive? But that's someone asking that question who's a little further down this track.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the thing. Like again, especially for anyone out there who's new to this topic, if you think that some of these things sound wild, I mean, yeah, I'll agree that they do sound wild, but look at who's asking these questions, okay? And look at who's making these statements. I'll leave it at
Oh,
that.
definitely. Yeah. See, and I'll mention again how these aerospace, military, government were going to esoteric people. Like, why would they bother talking to them if they think what they believe is nonsense or they've got nothing to add to the conversation? So I think that their path of exploration is leading down this esotericism as well.
Yeah, it's where we end up. Ultimately, we don't really know, but we're willing to go there, and whatever happens, happens. Quite frankly, right? So Brother Gregory comes into our conversation, and that was something I was not. I mean, neither of us knew who he was. We sort of. I wanted to kind of not just call upon the people that you or I know in some way or are connected to in some way with our spheres of movement or whatnot. I wanted to just like pull out from other avenues, right? So I joined up with this podcast matching service, right, that matches hosts and guests and whatnot. And Brother Gregory was a match. He accepted the invitation, and oh my God, that was quite a conversation.
Yeah, there was some good stuff in there. He was talking about cattle mutilations. Well, not that's not a good thing, but good content
Well,
is what I mean.
well, yeah, no, it's horrific, especially if you've ever seen those photos. It's you can't unsee that stuff.
No.
But I mean, I wasn't expecting it to go there, especially right off the bat. But because he said he was a sheep herder, I had to be like, yo, man, did you ever hear about cattle mutilations? Oh yeah. So check that out if you haven't. That was another great conversation.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And as you mentioned that, I realized that that hasn't come up in the hearings yet. Now, that's grounded in physical reality. So that question could be asked, but it might frighten people. So did you find cattle that were mutilated? What's happening there? Who do you think's doing that? I don't know if that line of questioning has been pursued yet at the hearings, but it might come up in the future.
Well, I know that's definitely not at this moment, and I don't know if if that would be appropriate, in my humble opinion, right? If that would be appropriate, it wouldn't be for a long time, right? Because
Mm.
the way that I view this is these hearings are sort of like a dog and pony show in a way. At this point, just getting people setting the stage, as it were, getting more eyes on the main stage, and you know, getting people open to it before they really start drilling down into these very important questions. But with respect to cattle mutilations, that's I mean, it's part of this, right? But it's I think where they're focused right now, and as they should be, is the physical nature of it and the dollars spent. Like, what are you spending, our American taxpayer dollars on that we can't account for, and where are these craft and such? That's the main focus right now.
Yeah, okay, that's a smart place to start.
So then we mix it up a little bit with both physical and esoteric. We talked to Paul Hynek, the one of the sons of the late and great Dr. J. Allen Hynek from Projects Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book, the astrophysicist who was contracted by the U.S. government for decades on multiple projects to officially investigate UFOs.
What a great one that was. Wow, that gave me so much to think about, Mike. That was one of the ones which had me pondering and thinking and exploring for days afterwards. So I was very grateful for that. And the level of sharing that man did, that how candid he was in the interview, really shocked me and
Yeah.
disarmed me.
The two things that sort of popped out to me on that conversation, um, were the one he talked about how Neil Armstrong made it a specific point to sit with his father and their family on a cruise. And, at this point, Dr. Jalen Hynek was known as like the UFO guy. And he's like, no matter what they talked about, and he didn't really know what they talked about because we specifically asked that question. But he's like, it doesn't really matter what they talked about. The fact that he was there and he made himself known and he sat next to the UFO guy meant something. And it's like, yeah, wow, that actually is quite something. And then he's also Paul Hynek himself is in the process of starting some pretty darn interesting research that I wasn't expecting to hear about, especially as it pertains to this topic.
Oh, that was what he was talking about there was shamanism 101. Yeah, I won't get into it now, but if you haven't seen that interview, it's well worth watching. Very comprehensive.
Absolutely, yeah. And we have plenty of disclaimers in there, so we're just going to leave that interview there and go check it out because I want to make sure that if you hear about those things, you hear the disclaimers too.
Yeah.
Not a laughing matter, though. I mean, it's serious stuff and interesting stuff. So, and you managed to track down someone quite interesting in Australia, Stuart.
Yeah, that was Tanya Vassi, beg your pardon. The first witness of the Westall UFO event, which is we know about that in this country because it happened in the city that I live in. It happened in Westall, and it's a while back. I think it was 1966, where a UFO, maybe more than one, was seen over a school by students and teachers, and even people who were neighbors of the school saw it. So Tanya is the very first person to see it. She's like the primary witness, and that was a fascinating conversation. Once again, the amazing open-hearted nature with which she approached that interview really stunned me.
Yeah, I mean, I was so grateful. It's something I hadn't heard of until you brought it up, and the fact that you were able to track. I don't say it like this, but track her down, right? Get in contact with her was fantastic, and then her willingness to show up and spend some time with us is great. It sounds like that might be few and far between, if ever again. But that's a perfect case in point, though, too. When one of the questions we asked was like, why are you talking about it now, and why have you been silent about it like all of your life? And it takes people. And until they get to the point where she said something to the effect of, I just don't care anymore. I'm, retired, and this is what happened. And, this is, I don't care what people say or believe. But a lot of times people do, and perhaps rightfully so, feel like they need to not say anything until they're in a position where it doesn't really, if they shake the tree, like, there's no consequences, as it were.
Yeah, now she was one of the people who had been silenced, and that comes up a bit when talking about this topic. So that's another whole rabbit hole there. Why is it being silenced? Who's doing the silencing? What's their motivation? And there's some touchy questions to be asked on that.
Indeed, yeah. And that's a good point, too. Because, going back to Robert Salas for sure, and I think I can't remember if Kevin Day is applicable to this one or not, but likely. What Robert Salas definitely, like those guys were taken by, I believe, a helicopter to a different base and debriefed immediately, and specifically said, "Do not talk about this with anyone." They were silenced as well.
Yeah.
And Kevin Day had talked about how plainclothes people come aboard the ship in the middle of the night and take all the data.
Yeah.
What is that about? I think I asked a question of, I mean, I kind of knew the answer, right? But, it was like, was that normal procedure? Like, no, hell no, it wasn't normal procedure at all. That does not happen.
Yeah, that's something
So,
that crops up during this whole conversation.
yeah, it's very mysterious, and so then I don't say we're never going to get political, right? Because politics is just stupid all around, right? But Stephen Bassett is a lobbyist in Washington D.C., and we had him in, and we were talking about the various states of disclosure, and at that point we were coming up to the hearing that we've sort of talked about multiple times now here, and he was giving us his background and his take on what is likely to happen and things like that.
I really like that, man. And we're getting some really high caliber guests here. I'm very honored. Now, the work he's doing is grounded in this reality, I would assert. He's there in Washington advocating for different types of disclosure, different information to come forward. And he mentioned it's a slow process, which I absolutely understand and respect. But that's starting here, in on a legislative level. And I really respect that.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, that's kind of where it has to start. It makes perfect sense. You have to make the legislation before you can announce that ET exists. You have to have laws, policy, and procedure in place for ET. Now, I mean, on a human level, I totally understand that, right? It's almost like introducing a new market that wasn't there, and I shouldn't say it that way, but I work in professional services, so that's kind of how my brain works, right? But then again, the other side of this is like, how do you make policy, law, and procedure for things that are I mean, I'm not going to say like it's all non-physical, right? Because it's not all non-physical. There's physical nature to it, but it's like it's borderline the different dimensions and whatnot. How do you put that into law? It's going to be interesting to see how this all sort of plays out.
Very much. And I meant to mention this to you a while ago, but I feel there's some external force pushing this disclosure along. So we've got people who are witnesses and experiencers who feel a compulsion to come forward. But I don't think that's enough for the government to start discussing this. I don't know exactly what I'm getting at here, but I sense that there's some sort of external force. So you might say, well, it's the ETs, or it's the interdimensional beings who want disclosure, and that might be possible too.
I mean, it could be. I mean, truly, there's nothing off the table with this conversation, but to reel it in a little bit more to the human side, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. So the moment that the Tic Tac video came out, it was that was sort of like the tip of the iceberg or the starting of the avalanche that is continuing to occur, and who or why that was done or whatever. From what I gather, it was sort of like a mistake that they being the Pentagon didn't necessarily want to have out there.
Wow, fascinating. I don't know if we'll ever get to see behind that particular curtain, but it's very fascinating.
Yeah, I'm going to say unlikely to do that. So then it was right around that time that it dawned. I mean, I don't know why this even happened the way that it did, but when we originally spoke with Reverend David Perry, our conversation was a fair amount longer than what we put out, and there was a large section that I thought was again too far down the road for our conversation of a young channel just sort of emerging, and that's when I realized like this is actually the not necessarily the again the whole conversation is great, but like the juiciest part of the conversation that sort of went off into the weeds. So we put that out there all by itself.
Yeah, well, see, that's been, I guess, part of your journey because you can cut this bit out if you want, but in the background, Mike and I we were discussing this section. I was saying, Mike, that's the most important part of the interview, and he ended up deciding to take it out, which I respected. And then subsequently down the track, you've thought, no, actually, that is important. That should be seen.
Yeah, no, I remember having hesitation. Like, I was like, this is just so difficult to wrap your head around that, because again, at that point, we were what, like 4, maybe 5 episodes in, and I didn't want to start, displaying a channel that, I was very, and I still am, right? I'm very cognizant or cautious of going too far down Woo Avenue too soon. So that's all that was about.
Okay, no, I respect that. And I meant that I respected your decision at the time. I asked those questions deliberately because I knew that thread was there with Jack Parsons. And also, once again, that's easy to establish because there's documentation and records on his involvement with this whole esoteric field. So I was trying to create a basis on which to head further in that direction, and which we subsequently have, but it takes time for that to unfold.
Yeah, I absolutely couldn't agree more with that. But then, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was, maybe there's some unseen force behind this particular show too, because that perfectly teed up our next guest, Dean Graves, who we we talked to about the Arcturians, and right from the start, I said like I'm mildly familiar with them, but I don't really know, and we're just having a conversation. No real way to prove if they're there or not, but regardless of if they exist or not, they say some pretty interesting, intelligent things.
Yeah, well, I had a sense that that interview was more in the vein of season two. Not quite, because that was involved channeling. But the other thing that occurred to me was some of the other earlier interviewees definitely brought it into experiencer type disclosures, personal disclosures. So, you know, I'm open to this in season two. I feel like there's already that tone about our show.
Yeah, it's definitely like whether I personally wanted to go there or not. Like I'm not really in control of this one anymore, right? It's going there. So now the question is, how do we sort of properly do it, right? Um, so anyways, everybody likes Halloween, and in the spirit of Halloween, we did a Halloween special with Reverend David Perry and talked about the occult, UFO connection, and the various. We asked, of course, because it's Halloween, I had to ask him about. If he's participated in any exorcisms and whatnot. So it was definitely a really interesting conversation.
Oh yeah, that was fantastic. And we had that weird technical interruption.
Yeah. So
So
let me
I don't
say
know.
this. Let me say this. I have a very robust system here. Everything that is all around me is freaking robust. Okay, and it's something like 600 megabytes per second. I'm hardwired in. It is flawless all day, every day. Okay, I effectively work the on the laptop. That's what I do. Never an issue at all, ever, except sometimes when we're talking about these conversations, and then that specific part of the conversation, it was the darkest part of our conversation, and the internet just literally turned off.
Now, I'm not being trite with this next comment, so it might sound like it. But if these entities can turn off nuclear weapons, I'm guessing they can turn off a Zoom call.
Well, okay, so then I mean, who knows? I gotta say it's just coincidence, right? But I definitely kept the awkwardness of it in there, and for people to see like that actually did happen. It wasn't like a show or a production that freaking happened.
Yeah.
Um, but then the question is like, okay, let's just play the other side. Like if it was something, someone or something. I mean, it's Halloween, right? We're talking about all kinds of weird, dark stuff. What would the message of that be then? Like, don't have this conversation, or what? I don't know.
That's really interesting to consider. And it was the absolute darkest part of the conversation when it happened. And it's a very serious discussion. So please check that episode out if you're interested. I don't know. See, we could have sort of collectively manifested that, or some external force did that. Maybe someone didn't want us talking about that topic. I'm not sure. Or, it might have been completely unconnected to that. But I'm also hardwired into, I've got amazingly fast internet connection here. So I was shocked when I lost you. I couldn't see you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you guys literally just disappeared off the screen. Well, first you froze up, I think, and then I was. Anyways, just check it out. It's because it's Halloween. It's good stuff. But so then we sort of feeling our way through, and at that time there was more. Another hearing was about to come out, so we did an episode just with ourselves, and then we just waited. We just sat back and waited for the hearing to come out, and then we immediately once again brought in Stephen Bassett to talk about that particular hearing.
I really enjoyed that second appearance. He's always bringing something interesting, and he's another one where he brings up so many topics that I think, oh wow, I never considered that. I've got to check this out. Hadn't even made that association before, so I very much enjoy having him on the show too.
Yeah, as do I. And he's great great guy all around, like super smart. He's got a, he reminds me. I don't know. I probably shouldn't say this, but he reminds me of George Carlin in his appearance, but also his talking and his mannerisms. It's just like because sometimes, even though this is a serious topic, sometimes he cracks me up a little bit. And I've seen him also talking in front of people live, in front of a big room full of people, and he's very he's got a good way about him.
Yeah, he's really engaging. I can see how that would work. I'd be absolutely honored to go to one of his presentations.
Yeah, he well, I mean, he definitely speaks all over America. I'm pretty sure he occasionally, kind of goes overseas and whatnot. But I don't know what his schedule is or if he has any plans for Australia. But just keep your eye out on this on his schedule, I guess, right?
Well, he's always welcome down here.
So then, sort of winding it down a little bit, you and I had another one where you were interviewing me essentially about being a UFO investigator. What's that all about? What's it like?
I was very pleased with that. Mike, you were an excellent guest, by the way, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much. Um,
Yeah.
it was,
You,
yeah. I mean, I felt a little bit weird doing it. Like, I'm fine to do this and ask people questions, but when I'm the one being asked questions, I was like, I don't know. But during the editing process, it's like, guess it should have. But it's just weird to, I don't know, weird to be the main topic, I guess.
well, I was grateful that you did that, and I learned a lot from that, and I reckon our audience will have learned a lot too.
Well, hopefully so. I mean, that was really the point of making myself uncomfortable in doing it in the first place. Is just to let it be known about what different, like the common themes and such of what happens during an investigation, and what do people think, or what are their expectations and whatnot.
Well, I was hoping it might encourage some of the viewers to register their sightings potentially.
Yeah, that would be a wonderful thing as well. Because like I've talked with a couple people who said that there was, it was like from 10 years ago or something. I was like, so why now? Why are you reporting this now, so long after? And they're like, oh well, I had no idea that we could do that. Like I knew that you guys existed, but I didn't know that like you could reach out. So hopefully that will inspire other folks to make a report at the MUFON website, and have their case investigated too.
That'd be wonderful. That's really moving things forward.
And then the big grand finale with Timothy Hogan. That was wow. That was I'm speechless. I'm still speechless.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about that one for days too. Now, I didn't know Timothy personally, but we had quite a few mutual friends, and he's spoken at at my church, not here in Melbourne, at one of the affiliate churches in America. So I'd already seen some of his presentations. So it was interestingly the connection came through you for that interview.
Um, yeah. I Yes. We'll just leave it at that. I'm actually I've already been asked about that, and I said I'm sorry. I can't answer that question.
Oh wow, okay, that's fascinating. I don't actually know the
um,
details of that, so that's good. Yeah, that's right. You should got to maintain those trusts and connections. But yeah, I was just mentioning that I had actually attempted to reach him to invite him on the show, and in the end, ironically, it was through you that he came on the show. I was grateful. I was very pleased that it happened.
and it was a perfect guest to sort of end out our season, and sort of tie everything all together, and then in a way like kind of tee up like, okay, this is where you where you go next, right, or where the conversation goes. But a lot of what he said, pretty much everything that he said, was just like, holy
Yeah, it sure was. Wow. It's so interesting to me that that group has been so quiet in the past about their knowledge, from my perception, and now so open. So there you go again. Like this disclosure thing, there's some sort of force. I should have asked him that during the interview, actually. Is there
Well, I
some sort
remember
of
I remember you asked him if there was how did you put it? Something like is I don't remember what the word, but basically the gist of it was like, you're coming forward now. U.S. government came forward. Catholic Church is coming forward. Like everybody's coming forward now. Is there like a concerted effort or and he
Mm.
basically in no uncertain terms says yes, there is. This doesn't all seem like it's connected, but it is, and that was pretty fascinating to get confirmation on.
Very much. I remember that now. Yeah, fantastic. There's always more to explore with that man. Um, there were so many threads we could have followed and tangential questions we could have gone. And I definitely have him back, Mike, if he's interested in coming back again.
I mean, yeah, I'd be very much open to that as well if he's interested or if it's sort of warranted in our future conversations. And I never even realized that the Knights Templar were still around. I had thought that they were sort of lost in time. Shortly after the 1400s or whatever it was. I didn't realize that they were still in existence, and it was pretty eye opening to learn that they are in fact still around. Much different than what they were originally because times have changed, and that they're coming forward as well with some pretty interesting, um, uh, mind blowing revelations.
Yeah, they've been keeping the flame alive. And one of the questions I almost asked him was, is the Statue of Liberty holding that torch above her head, is that a motif or an icon for this knowledge that's being passed down and kept alive?
Oh wow, definitely something I hadn't considered. So now you're gonna be pondering that one for the rest of the year. Uh,
I'll have to ask him next time we have him on. Hopefully, there is another time.
um, yeah, for sure. So that's kind of where we started, where we are, and where we're potentially going. Let us know what you think.
Yeah, it's wonderful to get your feedback. I love reading the comments. Please interact with us. Feel free to come on the show if you want to. Like, we're definitely open and we're into some very interesting topics in season 2. So please come on the journey with us.
Absolutely. The idea here is engagement and furthering the conversation. So now that we've sort of laid the foundation, I think it's appropriate that we open up the doors a little bit more, as it were. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. It's probably the wrong way to say it.
No, that's fine. That's the way. And step through that door.
Okay, yeah, that is the right way to say it because it's multiple meanings there.
I love it.
So thank you all very much for joining us on this journey this season, and may you have a wonderful, healthy, safe New Year and holiday celebration with your families.
Thank you. Much love and many blessings to everyone out there.